There are moments when life places you in rooms where loyalty is tested, where love is measured by what you're willing to lose, and where standing with someone costs you more than standing against them ever would. And sometimes, right in the tension between expectation and obedience, God reveals the kind of strength that doesn't roar, it simply chooses righteousness. That's where today's story leads us, because tucked inside the rise of Israel's greatest king is a man whose greatness wasn't crowned, but proven in surrendered Jonathan. Jonathan's story begins at a time when Israel's future felt fragile, when Saul's kingdom wavered between God's calling and human fear. Jonathan was a warrior long before David ever held a sling. He led with courage, faith, and an unshakable trust in the presence of God. He once climbed a rocky cliff with only his armor-bearer beside him, believing that God could save, whether by many or by few. And God honored that bold faith, shaking the Philistine camp and turning the battle in Israel's favor. Jonathan lived with a faith so alive that it stirred movement in heaven before it ever moved armies on earth. But Jonathan's greatest test came not with a sword, but with a friendship. When David emerged as God's chosen successor, Jonathan faced a crossroads between inheritance and obedience. Saul wanted David dead, but Jonathan saw something holy on David's life, something he couldn't deny. He made a covenant with David, not out of weakness, but out of reverence for God's will. He laid down his own royal robe, placing his future in God's hands rather than grasping for a throne God had not assigned him. In that moment, Jonathan proved that true strength is not only the ability to win battles, but the humility to yield when God is moving in another direction. Jonathan's loyalty was not blind, it was spiritual. He protected David not out of rebellion against Saul, but out of allegiance to righteousness. Even when Saul hurled a spear at him in anger, Jonathan refused to abandon what he knew was the will of God. He walked a path that cost him status, comfort, and safety, yet he remained steady. His final chapters unfold quietly. He dies on the battlefield beside his father, but his legacy echoes on the lips of David, who mourned him as a brother whose love surpassed anything he had ever known. Jonathan's life reminds us that sometimes the greatest heroes never sit on thrones. They hold them loosely for the sake of God's plan. Jonathan teaches us that real courage does not always look like slaying giants. It often looks like trusting God when obedience runs against personal ambition. Many people chase positions, platforms, and recognition, but Jonathan shows a different road, the road where honoring God matters more than securing a title. His life challenges us to ask whether we are more committed to God's purpose than we are to our own desires. His friendship with David also reveals the beauty of relationships shaped by God's presence. In a world that celebrates convenience, Jonathan loved with covenant loyalty. He wasn't threatened by another's calling, he defended it. He wasn't jealous of another's rising, he rejoiced in it. That kind of friendship is rare. But when the Holy Spirit knits hearts for God's purposes, that bond becomes a fortress against fear, envy, and betrayal. Jonathan models a friendship that strengthens destiny rather than competing with it. And finally, Jonathan's life shows us that surrender is not weakness, it is worship. Sometimes God asks us to release something we thought we were meant to hold. Sometimes He asks us to celebrate someone else's breakthrough while we stand in the shadows. Jonathan reminds us that the presence of God rests on those who choose obedience over opportunity. When we yield to His will, even if it costs us, He weaves our obedience into a story in ways greater than we can imagine. Jonathan's story closes without earthly glory, yet he shines as one of Scripture's purest examples of integrity. He stepped aside so God's choice could step forward. He fought bravely, loved deeply, and obeyed fully. And though his life ended on a battlefield, his influence lived on in the King who honored him, the kingdom he preserved, and the legacy of faith he left behind. Jonathan reminds us that greatness is not measured by the throne we occupy, but by the faithfulness we offer when no one is watching. His life calls us to courage, loyalty, humility, and unwavering trust in the God who sees every sacrifice made in His name.